Welcome to our presentation on GDPR-compliant use of blockchain for secure usage logs. This was created by Loyola, Daiqui and me, Valentin Zieglmeier, both of the Technical University of Munich. Now the key points of today's presentation. Our problem is that storing any personal data in blockchain is not GDPR compliant. Our contribution. This P3 pseudonym provisioning system. It provides unlinkable pseudonyms and proof of ownership for exercising legal rights. The impact? It enables GDPR compliant secure usage logs with blockchain. Importantly, no trusted third party is required, and it's independent of the utilized blockchain software. We'll get started with our use case. Secure usage logs. Now data owners and data consumers in our use case want to exchange a datum, right? A data owner wants to share with the data consumer a datum, and if data are made available to data consumers, we want to record securely the usage for data owners. And we use a distributed blockchain log for that you can see here symbolically. Now this usage is logged and exchange in the network. Well, why use blockchain for secure logging in the first place? To many of you this might already seem clear, but let's go through the key points of why this is advantageous in our case. We have a distributed context, untrusted participants, and require a data integrity guarantee. And actually there are prior works that show not just the feasibility but also the sensibility of using blockchain for secure logging. Well, there is one problem though. The problem is the GDPR or other privacy legislation that give data owners more rights in regard to the use of the data. Actually, blockchain logs are fundamentally at odds with the requirements of such privacy legislation as the GDPR. And this is the problem. Now, on the one hand, the reduced confidentiality, because everyone who is participating in the network can actually read entries, is at odds with the requirement to protect personal data. And secondly, the immutability is directly at odds with the right to erasure and by extension the right to rectification. Now we theorize. The GDPR only applies to personally identifiable information. Pseudonymized data are personally identifiable only if a link between the pseudonym and the real-world identity exists. That means they are anonymous otherwise. And of course, by extension, GDPR does not apply anymore as soon as they are anonymous. That means our solution: we allow users to self-provision pseudonyms, one-time pseudonyms, guaranteeing unlinkability and proof of ownership. Now let's get through the 4 key components of the P3 system, showing you how we actually enable this. We have the block structure, the new usage protocol, the pseudonym generation, and the deployment architecture. I'm going to go through them one by one. First, the block structure. Now, what we require to be stored are 4 things. Firstly, the pseudonym of the consumer. Secondly, the pseudonym of the owner. Now, both are required because both the owner and the consumer need to be able to query the blockchain for entries concerning them. And this is only possible if they can identify them. Now, by nature, they can only identify their own pseudonyms. Second and third, we require the usage log encrypted by the consumer and by the owner. Again, the same reason, both the consumer and the owner need to be able to read and verify the stored usage log. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get to a more trickier part, the new usage protocol. And you don't have to read the left side in detail. I'm going to explain step by step what happens in a simplified way. Now at the start, the owner holds a datum and the consumer holds nothing, but they are interested in that datum. The new usage protocol is now performed, and this is based on the non-repudiation protocol by Markovic et al. We have adapted it for the blockchain context with two key outcomes. Firstly, C and O generate individual pseudonyms for each new transaction, and O creates the usage log in the end and sends a blockchain update. Now what actually happens is that there's a randomized number of steps. The number is chosen by O in the beginning. And in each step, a fraction or a component of the datum is sent. But it's not just a part, right? Not just a set of bits, but actually it is encrypted in such a way that it can only be decrypted if all components are present. That means only if all messages are successfully transferred, the consumer can decrypt the datum by composing the messages together. Importantly though, because it is designed this way, both hold in the end a non-repudiation evidence, so they both can prove their interaction with each other. Additionally, the usage is securely logged. Good. Third, we have the pseudonym generation, maybe the most important part, because we need to guarantee certain properties, as we talked about before, with these one-time pseudonyms. And we came up with a two-step process. Firstly, an RSA public-private key pair is generated both by the consumer and the owner for each new transaction. They hash the public key with Blake2s. The hash then represents the one-time pseudonym. Importantly, this process is one-way, so it cannot be reversed feasibly. The resulting guarantees? Well, because of Blake2s, we have unlinkability, right? It's a cryptographic hash algorithm. Because of the underlying key pair, we have proof of ownership. By signing a message with their private key, any party can prove their ownership of a pseudonym, which is important. Good. Finally, the deployment architecture. As we have hinted at before, we work in a distributed, fully decentralized context. This is a peer-to-peer architecture, so no trusted third party is required. Each node consists of a P3 instance, of course, its own personal key store, KS, for public and private keys, and the usage log blockchain, which represents a copy of the shared blockchain. The second important point here, this is independent of the utilized blockchain solution, actually agnostic to it. So that means any blockchain really can be used. Okay. Now this is everything on the theoretical side. Let's get to the analysis. To justify our analysis, we start with the adversarial model. We have users in the set of data owners O and the set of data consumers C. Our adversary alpha can be either an owner, a consumer, or any third party. Now, because we use blockchain, attacks on the integrity of the log are infeasible in our view. That means we focus on attacks on the confidentiality of stored data. Our adversary has, as we assume, limited computational capacity, so they cannot take control of the full blockchain network. But they do not play fair within their means. Let's assume we have two logged usages, both of them from the same consumer, CI, of a datum of the same owner, OJ. We have UIG-J1 and UIJ2. Now the first attack is taking just a single logged usage and trying to derive the identity of CI, attack number 1, or OJ, attack number 2, right? Now secondly, from two logged usages, the adversary alpha tries to derive the association between these entries. So trying to derive that they are actually belonging to the same owner or the same consumer. Now this does not necessarily mean that they know the identity of the person, but already they know too much, right? They know two different entries, maybe they can start playing, they reduce the necessary effort to derive the identity in the long run. So this should also not happen. So let's summarize our analysis, and excuse us for being very brief here, this is simply due to the time. Now when it comes to the robustness against these attacks, let's go through them different attacks one by one. So when it comes to deriving an identity as any third party reading an entry, this is technically infeasible. We've described this before. You would have to crack Blake 2's cryptographic hash algorithm as well as RSA, which again seem infeasible. Secondly, the same is true for associating two usages. Again, you would have to derive the underlying identity from the pseudonyms, meaning you have to crack Blake 2's and RSA. Same reason, technically infeasible. A bit more tricky is the case of owned data. In our interaction between a consumer and an owner for a new usage, both of them actually need to reveal their real identity to each other by design, because we need accountability. Now, you can see here we have written legally infeasible. Technically, it's feasible for an attacker, that is one of these, consumer or owner, to leak these data that they have, they leak the identity. But by leaking this identity, they irrevocably also leak their own identity, because it's irrevocably connected to that. So in order to be able to prove that they actually know this identity and not just claim they know, they have to also leak their own. Which means legally they are in trouble, because they can be legally enforced. Good. In our view, this is enough, because this is a legal problem, right? GDPR, so we think it's enough if it can be tackled legally. So we summarize. The protocol is secure, but beyond that, it can even be hardened relatively easily with 2 steps. So by adding fake chatter, we can hide real requests even better. Secondly, the block publication can be randomized, therefore hiding association between occurring communication and new blocks. Now with all of that, we conclude that the system is sufficiently secure and can be hardened even further. But of course, this is not all, right? We still require GDPR compliance. So do we actually do it? Do we actually have it? Well, the payload is encrypted, which means confidentiality is enabled. Each payload is encrypted individually, right, as we said before. So this is actually the best we can do. More importantly, the unlinkability and proof of ownership, as guaranteed by our pseudonym generation, enable the right to erasure and by extension the right to rectification. So technically, nothing has to be deleted, but legally the right to erasure is fulfilled, which is of course the ideal solution. Now in summary, our P3 system guarantees pseudonyms with unlinkability and proof of ownership, non-repudiation evidence for all parties. Now pseudonyms with unlinkability and proof of ownership, they enable the right to erasure and rectification as required by the GDPR, and this non-repudiation evidence, it enables accountability for the usage log. Third, we have independence of a trusted third party and independence of the underlying blockchain solution, which means any blockchain can be used. In summary, or in short, P3 enables GDPR-compliant secure usage logs on any blockchain. With that, thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the workshop.